In this lesson, you will learn how to divide a whole number by a decimal number using base 10 blocks, number lines, and the standard algorithm for division. Let's start with an example. Connor has 3 meters of wood for a project. The wood must be cut into pieces that are 0.75 or 75 hundredths meters. How many pieces of wood can Connor cut from the 3-meter piece of wood? At first, I need to think about what do I know and what do I want to know from this problem. So if I think about the things I know that Connor has 3 meters of wood. I also know that he needs to cut the wood into 75 hundredths pieces. So if I think about those two things, I know that he's got 3 meters of wood, and I know that his pieces are 0.75 hundredths. Now, what I want to know is how many pieces of wood can he cut from that 3-meter piece of wood. So I've got a couple different things I need to look at here. If I need to know how many pieces, I should think about if I have 3 whole meters of wood and he's cutting the pieces that are not a full meter, am I going to get more than 3 or less than 3? If I think about that reasonably, I think my answer is going to be more than 3 meters because he is not cutting a whole meter for each piece. So let's think about doing some math. If I look at this example in base 10 blocks, right here I have 3 hundredths grids. The reason I have 3 is because he's got 3 meters of wood. How I can break this out and show my work on these hundredths grids is to show each piece that he would cut. And since I know that each piece is going to be 75 hundredths, I'm going to show 75 hundredths as many times as I can on these 300 boards. So I'm going to mark my 75 hundredths. I also know that 75 hundredths has 7 tenths, so I'm going to start there. There's 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths, 7 tenths. There's 7 tenths, but now the next part of my number is 5 hundredths. So I'm going to keep coloring 5 hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in red, I have 75 hundredths marked. So technically, that's 1 piece of wood that he would have cut from his 3-meter piece of wood to begin with. I'm going to change colors because I have a lot more left to go. I have all this that signifies my wood that I still need to cut. So I'm going to change my color and I'm going to show again another 75 hundredths. I'm not going to move to the next 100 board because I still have extra that I need to show right here. So I'm going to use what I have and I'm going to take these 5 hundredths because 5 hundredths is part of my number 75 hundredths. And I'm going to continue now with the 7 tenths of that number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I made another 7 tenths and I'm going to keep going. So there I have 75 hundredths in red. I have 75 hundredths in blue. Let's switch to yellow. Now 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths, 7 tenths, but I still need to show my 5 hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. So I've got a little extra wood. Let's see if I can make one more. Let's switch to green. I'm going to use these 5 hundredths because I've got to use all of the wood, not just part of it, but all of it. So there's the 5 hundredths. And if I look back at my number, I need 7 tenths and 5 hundredths. So I've got my 5 hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tenths. So now if I look at my work, I need to see how many colors do I have. Well, I've got one red section right there, a blue section, a yellow section, and a green section. So if I look at my colors, I have 4 different sections that are 75 hundredths of a meter. So I know that when I go to say my answer should be 4 pieces. Awesome. Let's try to show our work on a number line. Here, if I did my number line, I would have to start at 0, and I know that my piece of wood is 3 meters altogether. So now I've got since I'm cutting it in 75 hundredths, my first number I would show on my number line is my 75 hundredths. So now I've got to figure out, well, how many sections can I do that? In order to do it, I'm going to keep continuing or skip counting by 75 hundredths because that's the size of the piece that I'm cutting off. So if I were to double this or do it again, I would add my 2 decimal numbers together. I know that when I add decimals, I can drop my decimal right down to my answer. I bring it straight down. 5 plus 5 gives me 10. Regroup with my 1. 7 plus 7 is 14, plus the 1 that I carried would give me 15. And I'm going to add my whole number of 1. So that's the next number on my number line. So far I've got 2 different sections, but I haven't cut all of the sections just yet because I know that I haven't made it to 3. So I'm going to erase this work and give myself a little more space. I'm not going to start with 75 hundredths again because I just ended with 1 and 5 tenths. But I am going to add my 75 hundredths because that's the size of the piece that I'm cutting. Drop my decimal. I'm going to add my 2 numbers together. 0 plus 5 gives me 5. 5 plus 7 gives me 12. Carry my 1 there. 1 plus 1 gives me 2. So that's going to be the 3rd piece for me. Okay, I'm going to erase this, give myself a little more space. And let's check and see if it would be correct if I took my 2.25 as my 3rd piece and added 75 hundredths. Here we go. 5 plus 5 gives me 10. 7 plus 2 gives me 9, plus the extra 1 would give me 10. Drop my decimal straight down, and 1 plus 1 gives me 3. So on this example, the number line shows you that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, just like we figured out in our first one. Now let's talk about this as standard. If I'm going to do this as a standard way, I need to think about what number is going to go on the inside of my problem and what number is going to go on the outside of my problem. This depends on what am I looking for. I need to figure out what am I actually dividing. Am I dividing the pieces or am I dividing the wood as it started? And I need to divide the wood as it started as that 3 meter piece, which would mean on my outside goes my 75 hundredths. I'm taking the 3 meters of wood that I have and I'm dividing them into 75 hundredths pieces. Now this gets really tricky because I have a decimal number on my outside of this number. And I cannot divide with a decimal when it's on the outside. So there's a couple different things that we need to think about. We need to think back to 4th grade when we learned that we can change numbers by making them 10 times bigger or 100 times bigger. So since I cannot do this, I'm going to change it by making this number right here, my 75 hundredths, 10 times larger. If I did that, that would mean that this 7 in the 10th place would scoot over 1 place value to my 1's place. And this 5 in my hundredths place would scoot over 1 place value to the 10ths. But if I did that, I didn't get rid of my decimal. It's still there, and I cannot divide with that. We just talked about that. So that's not going to work out. So if I can't multiply by 10 or make it 10 times larger, maybe I can make it 100 times larger. And if I make it 100 times larger, what happens too, because I have 2 zeros in my 100, my number is going to, or these digits are each going to bump over 2 place values to the left because that's how the numbers get larger, with the place values to the left. So in this case, my 5 went from my hundredths to my ones, and my 7 went from the tenths to the tens because I got 100 times greater. So the rule with that is if I do it to the outside number, I've got to do the exact same thing to my inside number. Same with fractions. Whatever we did to the top, we did to the bottom. I've got to do the same thing here. So in this case, I'm going to take this inside number, and I'm also going to make that 100 times larger. So you can see that I would have to take the 3 that's there and multiply it by 100, which would give me 300. I'm going to go to the next one to give myself a little more space. We know that this is now our problem. Because I did the same thing to the inside number and to the outside number, I made an equivalent problem. So if I do this, I've already solved this twice now, so I believe my answer is going to be 4. I know that I've got to take some number up here, multiply it by my 75 to give me 300, because the second step here, once I divide, is to multiply. So I'm going to check my work over here, and I think my answer is going to be 4. So I'm going to multiply my 75 times 4. 5 times 4 gives me 0. Carry my 2. 4 times 7 is 28. Plus the 2 that I carried is going to give me 30. So I've shown here, even with the standard algorithm, that my answer is still going to give me 4 pieces of wood. Let's try one more example. Let's look at this problem. Ella is having a cookout and has 2 liters of lemonade. She's serving lemonade in glasses that hold 800 liters. How many glasses of lemonade can she serve at her cookout? So again, the first thing I need to think about is, what do I know? I know that Ella is having a cookout and she has 2 liters of lemonade. And then I need to know how many glasses. Well, the thing I know about her glasses is that each glass can hold 800ths of a liter. Well, that's not very much, so I think my answer is going to be more than 2 here, but let's see. So if I go ahead and show you this, what it looks like on my work on the hundreds grid like we did before, I am breaking apart in my hundreds grid. I'm taking the 800ths, and each little square represents 100ths. So what I did here is show 800ths. And I showed 1 in each one of those hundredths because that is going to be the first glass that she's able to pour. If I look at this odd shape of the 2, that is another 800ths, so that's the second glass. I can keep going with the third funky little shape there. That would be the third glass showing 800ths. If I continued all the way on 2 hundredths grids, again 2 because the whole number is 2 in my problem, I can see that Ella can pour 25 glasses from her 2 liters if each glass holds 800ths. If I look at my number line, I can see that my numbers on the bottom are going up by that 800ths. It starts with 800ths and then it gets to 1600ths and 2400ths. Those are all multiples of 8. And if I count that all the way out from 0 to 2, it also shows that she will have 25 hundredths. If I did this in the standard way, I've got to show my 2 on the inside because that's what I'm dividing, and my 800ths on the outside. We know we can't solve this with that decimal out there, so I've got to make this number not 10 times bigger, but 100 times bigger. And then I've got to do the same thing to the number on the inside. So now if I take this, it will turn into 8 because I'm taking this 8 and I'm scooting it over 2 place values. And then the same with 2 times 100 is going to give me 200. If I do this, I've already showed you that my answer is 25. My 8 goes into 20 2 times. That gives me 16. I subtract and get 4. Drop this 0, and it goes into 40 5 times, and it does go in evenly.